So, hi, Stu. Thanks very much for coming along and taking a little bit of time out to have a just a conversation with me about your career and what got you here. So, welcome along.
Thanks, sorry. Pleasure to be here. Excited.
Brilliant. So, let's kick off with just tell us a bit about your current role and how you got where you are now. The short version of course, of how you
Not
got to be
yeah. I'm not
founder
very
of
good
this
at short
brilliant
versions.
company.
Sorry, but I'll try my best. If I start rambling, just cut me off. Um, so I am the founder of a peanut butter brand called Manilife. I say peanut butter brand because that's how we started. But we also do almond butter. We've got a range of snacking peanuts as well. As the founder, my role has changed loads, as you'd expect, over the years, from doing like everything and just complete chaos to now I'm very much like face the brand. So that's with sales, marketing, our supply chain, and I lead our innovation. We recently promoted our ops and finance director to be RMD, which has been like one of the greatest things I've ever done because it's brought a lot of the joy back. Uh,
Brilliant.
and yeah, and it's going really well.
Excellent. Brilliant. So, tell us a bit about the business, this fantastic business.
So Manilife is we're now again the fastest growing peanut butter brand in the UK. Uh, as I said, we're quite famous for peanut butter, but we've also recently launched some snacking peanuts. And our thing is that we like adopt the same kind of craft principles you're used to seeing in things like coffee and chocolate to peanut butter. So we source peanuts from a single family in Cordoba, Argentina. We create flavors through process as opposed to like add ingredients. And obviously, I would say this, but like it is widely accepted that we create the best tasting product like on the planet. Um, but I guess how we got going is quite an interesting story. So Manilife basically started when I was offered a job at a company called PwC years and years ago to be an accountant. Knew I didn't fancy it, so decided I'd put it off and move to Argentina, where the idea was I was going to go there and basically build up enough guilt to become an accountant for 3 years. Yeah, I like quite randomly fell into working with a peanut butter social enterprise, and we basically used to go around soup kitchens teaching kids and families how to use the stuff, and it was magic. Like it's such an amazing tool to get kids to eat better because it turns like a piece of fruit into something genuinely delicious and also makes it more nutritious, which is a rhyme, which was nutritious. So interest grew and grew through that. Eventually met the family that we still source our peanuts from today. Fell in love with amazing people, great product. And it was around that time that I looked at the market back home. And so whilst it was growing, no one was speaking about peanut butter the same way we spoke about coffee or chocolate. And in particular, there was no provenance. So initially, Manilife was going to be the world's first provenance-led peanut butter brand. And we so come home, import the first ton, and it was a complete disaster because the day the first ton arrived, our production partner pulled out. So I had a ton of peanuts in 25 kilo bags in my bedroom with no one to make it. So that summer, got together about 45 friends, rented out my rugby club kitchen, and we spent the entire summer making 4,000 jars of peanut butter, one jar at a time, which was like hellish, if I'm honest, for me. I think my friends enjoyed it, but it was really formative for a couple of reasons. One, it was like the beginning. I hate the word hustle because it sounds really American to what we talking about earlier, but like it was the beginning of that like Manilife hustle. So like find a way. But the big thing is that summer we developed a way of making the product that hadn't existed before, and kind of still doesn't. So you can't make our product in like normal peanut butter factory. And so that was like what sowed the seeds of the kind of what we have today.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's such a lovely backstory as well because it's as you said, social enterprise. It hits so many buttons, isn't it? From taste,
Yeah.
health, helping you, as you said, young people and maybe
Yeah.
me, people like
Yeah.
me who's not the best vegetable eater in the world.
Yeah.
So
Just add some peanut butter, you'll be fine.
it's a game changer,
Yeah.
game changer. So one of the things we had a little bird told me
Mm.
that you were very ill as a teenager.
Yeah.
And this might have had some impact on your life. So did you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, and I think it very much did. When I was 15, I was diagnosed with like quite a serious illness that like manifested in loads of different ways. But one of the ways was like neurological symptoms. So basically plunged into like just horrific uh depression, like psychosis, all this. Uh
Mm.
and doctors told me needed to like reassess my aspirations, like would never write all this kind of would never write again, all this kind of quite heavy stuff at the time, I think, for anyone, but particularly for like a teenager.
I'll
Um,
never write again. That's
yeah,
a big thing.
yeah. We can just time that, so it's fine. But yeah, that was one. That was a weird one because not being able to write, and I can write now, which is good. But it's like not that big a deal. But for some reason, that was the one that was like kind of scary at the time. And I took a year out of school, pretty much, I mean, just under a year. Um, and I think basically what came out of that was a few things. So one, like the beginnings of what I used to refer to as like fuck you motivation. So the doctor that told me all this stuff was like in my mind quite a lot when I was striving to kind of prove them wrong, and I did. Graduate from school on time, did pretty well. Um, and I think a second thing that it did was that it developed like chip on my shoulders, maybe not quite the right term, but developed like a chip of like, well, I managed to get through that. And it was like, don't get me wrong, people go through way harder stuff. But it was tough. And so managed to get through that. Like it was almost I guess like permission to try and do
Hmm.
something a bit more out of the ordinary. Because yeah, like if someone in my position where you kind of arguably been at death's door, come
Very
from a
serious.
family, yeah, come from a family who are like very supportive and kind of prove that when you hit rock bottom, you still have that support network. If someone like me can't go out and take a few risks and start a business, then like who can? So I think, yeah, it was like formative for sure. Um, I also think that in life, everyone has periods of like great struggle, and often they're the periods. I mean, this is really cliche, but they're the periods of like great learning. And in a way, whilst at the time it was pretty rubbish, in hindsight, I was pretty quite lucky that mine happened relatively early on.
Relatively young, yeah, yeah.
So as stuff's got like running a business or starting a business is really hard. When it has been really hard, there've been a few things. So one was it's tough, but it's better than being an accountant. That was one option. And the other is it's tough, but is it as hard as that period? And I think there have been times when it's got close, but it's never, yeah, like
Never that bad.
yeah, that period like prepared me for a lot of future struggle, I think. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a blessing.
No, it's interesting because some people do say that, it's like when things really are tough, people say nobody died.
Yeah.
And it sometimes people think that sounds strange, but you have to sometimes put it in perspective and say, literally nobody died.
Yeah.
This is not the end of the world. We will survive this. It's just tough.
Yeah.
And that can help you, as you said, get through things. What other lessons would you say? So you've had times when things were tough, but I mean, you could have died at the first hurdle because, as you said, you got a ton of peanuts in your living room or wherever
Yeah.
it is, and
Yeah.
nobody to produce it. I mean, it could have gone wrong and
Yeah.
just never started in the first place.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
other things have happened that that you've had to overcome?
Um, God, okay, got to think of this. So obviously loads. Um, I think so. There's a few, and I'm going to try and frame them as kind of lessons. So number one is that fear of failure and like the kind of the almost like demonic levels of drive that come from that. Whilst people say fear of failure is usually framed as like a negative, I don't think there are many more drivers more powerful than that. And particularly in the early days of running a business, like that's the, for me at least, and I think for my peers, that's the fuel. And it's like, use it. And that's the stuff that's going to get you doing like crazy hours, like digging really deep when working hard is almost like the only means of getting out, and that's the kind of early sprint. Flip side of that is, as the business grows and as the business grew, the challenges and obstacles become one more complex, particularly as people get involved, other people get involved. And so working hard and digging deep isn't necessarily like the road to solution. And so there's like a change of tack required. And also, whilst fear of failure is like a super potent fuel for a spell, if it is the fuel for too long, and there's like that like almost like self-critique voice and it that loads of people talk about in their head that drives them, like that works to a point, but if it goes on too long, then you burn out. And I burn out as a result of that.
Wow.
And so it's like, it's hard, but if you can find a way to transition from that being the motivator to kind of more healthy motivators like I mean, desire to explore, desire to learn, desire to create, then that's like the secret sauce. And it's crazy how common that story is as well. I mean, I'm sure you've probably had people in interviews talking about
for sure. Are you motivated now by, because it's interesting when we talk to clients, we try to work out, is this person motivated by what they're fear of, or are they motivated by a dream and a vision? Sometimes it can be both. What would you say is motivating you now then?
It's a mix. Like early days, it was almost pure that. Now it's a bit more like creating something amazing.
Bit more vision and passion.
There is always that like there's always been that making people happy element, which on the one hand is cool because it's like you get to see about people all the time, and Manilife is like, we make a lot of people really happy because it's great product and we do quite like fun stuff. But the flip of that is it's a very like external motivator, and you're not in control of whether people are happy or not. And there's always going to be that just obsession, like compulsion thing, which people talk about. But I also, another thing that has changed since I started the business is through Manilife, I tried to sell her a jar of peanut butter, and then she eventually bought one and went on a date with me. But I met my wife, and she birthed. I didn't birth anyone. She birthed our twin girls. So like creating a life for them where I can kind of spend meaningful time with them growing up in a way that a kind of full-time employee whose wealth and earnings is linked to their time maybe might struggle to do, is another massive motivator.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So now family, and that's the other thing we realize is that motivation can change because having children, getting married, these life events can be dramatic, switching. I mean, you can get somebody who's struggled, business is just like frivolous and it's all very light, and then you have children and suddenly it all
Yeah,
gets
you're
very
like,
serious.
oh, we need to make some serious cat. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's a different focus. And as you said,
Yeah,
how do you buy time? You know,
yeah,
time is something so precious with a child, isn't it? I mean, once the certain years have gone, there's no way, no amount of money can ever go
yeah,
back and fix that.
yeah,
So it's quite
yeah,
interesting. So,
yeah. And on that, I'm like immensely lucky that I started the Manilife journey years before they were born. Because it's funny, people always talk about like the risks of starting a business, and like they definitely are. They're a massive risk. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're 23, 24, caveat is I had two loving parents that had a spare bedroom that I could go to if stuff went wrong. Um, but like the reality of the risk facing a 23-year-old versus the risk facing a 32-year-old with a mortgage or rent and kids are like completely different worlds. So
absolutely.
I've got like insane respect for people who start businesses when they've got families, and far less respect for people like me who did it when there's nothing to lose.
You're the easy Stu.
Yeah, exactly.
With that in mind, who comes to mind when you look at people and think, I admire this person, I admire them? What what comes to mind?
Um, so I think there's a few. One is this is hilarious because he's obviously got pretty patchy character, but Liam Gallagher, he's an
Okay,
like
yeah, interesting.
like very flawed character, but essentially built like one of the greatest bands in history and the greatest brands in the world uh, through like yeah, just like kind of yeah, and I just love Oasis basically. But that ignoring that for a second because that's a bit kind of left field. I have a lot of respect for clearly my parents, but also my wife's mother, so mother-in-law. She's like
Mm.
grew up in Finland, no roots here, met her dad, moved here. They split. Uh, she has built an amazing life for herself here, with no real support network. Um, and yeah, so mad respect for her. I guess generally my I have the deepest respect for people who create things for themselves without the support network and safety net that I was fortunate enough to grow up
Yeah, brilliant.
with.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Probably cut the first bit of that answer and just finish the
But
do
that's
the last
brilliant
bit.
though. That
Yeah,
because lots of people, you know, mother-in-laws, there's all the mother-in-law jokes and all the rest of it. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's amazing. I don't think I've ever spoken to somebody who says the person they admire is their mother-in-law, which
I
is
admire a lot of people,
fantastic.
but that's the one that came to mind.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And you say left field for Oasis, but success is success, right? I mean, success is all relative to whoever's doing it, but that is success, whether you like the music or don't like the music. I mean, that is a successful band. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
doubt about it. A successful brand and reinventing themselves. They're coming back again, and
yeah. Can't wait.
tickets sold out in what time? So,
Yeah. If it wasn't for Ticketmaster's just sheer ineptitude, it would have sold out in a second. But luckily,
have you had a ticket? Have you got a ticket?
got to.
Oh, well done, well done, well
Yeah.
done. So, tell us a bit. So, looking in the future, then, Manilife's obviously it's got its product range. It's doing well. It's growing. What's the next 5 years look like? What's your view of where do you want to go?
So if we frame like Manilife kind of in a vacuum, uh, I want us to help transition peanut butter, which is like magic product from like a breakfast kind of like semi staple that like 40% of the country eat, to like an all out staple cupboard ingredient that is used across the board. And through that, I would like us to play a major role, or at least a role, in getting the country eating better, but more importantly, like cooking. I think in the last like 3 generations, the country's kind of forgotten how to cook. And I think that is like it's like a social lever that I believe is like so powerful. And I would like us to play our part in reversing that.
Brilliant.
And then from a kind of like selfish perspective, I guess, want Manilife to become the UK's favorite peanut butter. Same in a European nation, and like to take a dent out KP, who are a formidable business, but I think we could do a better job than them. And I would quite like to see us transition from not just like something you can find in supermarkets, online, etc., into like an experiential brand. So I love this idea of Manilife placing peanut butter in like the cafe kind of world, so like peanut butter cafes. Because if you think about this going on a bit, if you think about the difference between chocolate, coffee, and beer, so all those categories have had like kind of craft revolutions where like
that's true.
The
Yeah.
degree of quality and provenance and storytelling in them has grown. Coffee and beer are like up here, chocolate's down here, and I think it's because coffee and beer are like experiential products kind of by default, whereas chocolate is something that you have in a bar at home, like a bar like this.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's.
I think if we
I
can
like
make
that.
peanut butter like an experiential thing, then that can help kick it on and get more people
Wow.
into it.
So very lofty aims over the next 5 years. That's absolutely phenomenal. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, we'll be watching and see how it goes. Hopefully, I can contribute just a little bit to that.
Comes the cafe.
What about books? Are you a book reader, a listener, or?
As I'm sure you'll appreciate. Sorry, but historically I've read lots. I had a bit of a think about this before. Got 3 came to mind. So there's one, and this book is unbelievable. It's called Material World, and it's by E.Conway. And it's basically about how, whilst all the value in like the world economy is reflected in like the ethereal kind of tech businesses, service world, in reality, the world relies on like 5 materials that are the building blocks for all of this stuff. And it's like absolutely fascinating, and it's all about how much destruction was part of it is about the destruction that is caused in the pursuit of acquiring those materials, and they're not what you'd expect. Other one is Walking with Destiny by Andrew Roberts, which is Winston Churchill's like mammoth biography, and which is like just unbelievable. And then another one which is pretty bit cliche for this kind of word, but Let My People Go Surfing by I can't remember his by, but it's
Let like My People Go Surfing.
Yeah.
And what's that one about?
So it's the story of I think it's the Patagonia founder, Yvon Chouinard. Can't pronounce his name, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, My People Go Surfing, brilliant.
Yeah.
So range of books. I mean, it's fascinating the amount of leaders I speak to who you get those who are at the earlier stage in businesses are reading every book about every sort of how-to book and famous people and blah blah blah. But then when you get a certain amount of success, it's quite interesting to see the amount of people who read books that are just random books that they just enjoy. Yeah. It's not necessarily about how to build a business or being inspired by somebody to build a business, but just general whatever you're interested in.
Well, it's this whole thing around like when you're at the beginning, and and it plays into the like motivated by the furnace of fear of failure. You're like in the trenches and you just need to go, 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 go. And that is all about action, 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 action. Whereas as you grow and as like basically people who are better than you start doing the jobs that you were doing before, the role becomes a bit more about, I guess, like thinking laterally and exploring, and motivation becomes about exploring. And that's when I guess like ideas become a bit more important, and ideas come from like tangential and parallel fields rather than like in the trench. So I'm not surprised at that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. So, one of the things is the challenges. When we talk about challenges, obviously you have your own challenges in the business, but what about in the industry? What would you say? Is there any particular challenges in the industry?
I mean, there's loads that people talk about and write about all the time. I think kind of flipping it on its head a bit, I think one of the biggest challenges with food in the UK in particular, the UK, US in particular, but I guess Western world generally, is that I think the market has failed to deliver food, like the quality of what we eat and eat and cook, and just that putting our bodies in general, not just in food, but in like FMCG in generally, is not good. I think it's a major driver of the kind of
So
health
quality
crisis.
is the
Health
big
crisis.
problem with quality.
Well, I think it's partly quality, but it's also partly this whole thing that's kind of in the zeitgeist at the moment, which is ultra processed food. And if you think about like the most successful food business in the world, the bulk of what they're selling is not real food. And I think it's kind of hard for someone who's set up in business to flirt with this thought, because obviously like I'm pro markets, I'm pro creation, pro business, but I actually do think that the UK food industry, whatever you want to call it, needs intervention to correct what's happened. And I'm actually not I'm not clear on whether our industry should be at the table for those discussions or not, because obviously like we all stand to gain or lose from whatever intervention is decided. But yeah, I think
that's interesting.
The market hasn't delivered a like socially optimal solution. But
so in your vision, and over the next 5 years, would be or potentially could be a great contribution to, as you said, getting more people to eat vegetables and foods that maybe they didn't traditionally enjoy so much.
Just like cook and sit down and eat like real food. I think it's like what is I genuinely believe that if the UK learned to cook again, learned that time spent eating good food is valuable as opposed to like a cost on time, so many of the problems we're facing would be if not wholly resolved, at least majorly
partly resolved. So the trends from COVID, because there were some suggestions that COVID got people, plus you had this massive wave of celebrity chefs and celebrity cooks and God knows what, or celebrity master chef, this, that, and the other. I mean, they're still around, but I thought COVID got people cooking again because people had time and weren't going out to restaurants, so therefore they needed to cook food a bit more. Has that trend not really continued then?
I think it has, but I think like everything else in COVID, it was like you were one side of the corner or the other. Like if you're a family of freelancers where like the support for freelancers was basically nothing, and versus a family of like young professionals that were furloughed and were paid 80% of their salary, like one family's learning to make sourdough and having fun with their kids. The other family is like drowning and stressed in a high rise, eating frozen pizzas still. So I
Very
think,
different.
yeah, and I'm less worried about the young professional families that were learning how to make sourdough. I'm more worried about like the bulk of the country who are
who were struggling.
like I'm kind of acquainted. I was on a panel the other day. Guess what number of households in the UK don't have a cooker? And a cooker is an oven, a hob, like something to basically cook with, i.e. not a microwave.
Wow, I would have said like 1% or something really low.
2 million households.
Wow, that is incredible.
1 million households don't have a fridge, and 3 million don't have a freezer. Freezer's less, feels less important, but like if you think about shopping on a budget,
no fridge, and no oven. Wow. So that, as you said, that determines massively what you're likely to eat. If you've got you can't cook anything, and you can't put anything in a fridge, so you can't store it. So very interesting. That is interesting. So that's interesting. So it's a lot to overcome.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
But
we will prevail.
Yeah. If you were to do this all over again, apart from having a ton of peanuts in your living room, what would you do anything different?
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a long list of things for sure. I think one thing that's like pragmatic advice that I actually give people who are starting business now is that, so when I started Manilife, obviously you're doing everything, and we relied on like volunteers, friends, amazing people that I'll be grateful to for like the rest of my life to get going. But in the period of like the year and a half where it was just me and volunteers, and I was doing all these different roles, a few things happened. So one, like habits ingrained of like do yourself as opposed to clarify and frame the objective and like pass someone else. And so when I did start hiring people, that because everyone who worked for us before wasn't paid, there was this habit of like, if I'm going to ask them to do something, then I need to do it as well, which obviously as a volunteer is fine, but as an employee is probably pretty annoying because it's like, no boss, this is my job. But the other thing, which is more practical, is just because you are doing 8-9 different roles doesn't mean you shouldn't define the roles formally. So
interesting.
What happened was like the business, which is like 4 or 5 different functions, was all in my head. It was like a spaghetti mess. And as we start building a team, rather than what would have been optimal, which is like, okay, I'm going to hand over the ops and finance role that I've written down here and give it to whoever, it was like, you're hired in ops and finance, and here's the like a few reels of spaghetti of that, and 3 years later, oh god, remember this. So I think there's early businesses often have a fear of being formal because it feels corporate or like not comfortable, but I actually think clarity and formality, so long as it's not overcooked, is like super
Well, it's a great tip because it's a phenomenal tip, because one of the things when we're working with clients is this idea that a default diary, call it a default diary, where you take on functions in segments rather than just randomly. Because as you said, if you've got a million things to do, you just do a bit of all of them all over the place, all of the time, and you're a bit faffing in and out. You can even write an email, take a phone call, you haven't finished the email. There's so many different tabs that open on your computer, and it just becomes crazy. But actually saying, I will take out 2 hours this morning and I'm just going to do marketing. I'm going to do an hour this evening and I'm just going to do bookkeeping, and having those segments where you can have, as you said, focused tasks rather than try to do everything all day, every day without any sort of organized structure. And you do all of them probably not so well. is
Yeah.
quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So that's a great tip. The idea that you can, I love that one. Just because you do 8 or 9 roles does not mean you should not define each role. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great line. So in that sense, why do you think most businesses fail? Because we encourage people to have businesses. The statistics say about 80% of businesses don't get to year 5. So that's not great. Why do you think most businesses don't work?
I think there's, again, two sides of the coin. I think they either try and do too much and do nothing well, or they are so focused on doing less better that they actually don't do enough.
Yeah.
The 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 mantra of like do less better or keep the main thing is something that gets like repeated again and again. But I think there's a bit of like selection bias in that the people that are touting that are the businesses that have made it through. And I think in the early days, like because there is so much to do, those that have a bias to action, and I think are the ones who are more likely to like get through the trench. And it's only as you become like what some might deem a success, i.e., like through the, let's call it like in food, you talk about like the 5 million trap, where lots of businesses get stuck at can turnover. It's only then that I think the hyper focus and doing less better really starts to pay dividends properly. But that's just like an opinion.
Yeah. No, it's fine. Yeah. I mean, when I speak to business owner, I tend to say, get cash coming in. Focus on very little else, but get cash coming in. I says most things can be resolved if you have money.
Yeah.
But not much gets resolved if you don't have any money. That's really difficult. If the business isn't earning any money, there's very little space to fix things. If you're earning money but you've got problems, you can still put money to fix things, and that's the fundamental. So I always say, it'd be lovely to do X, Y, Z. They have all these lovely things you'd love to do, but in the meantime, you need to get some cash. So you might have to do things you don't enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. But it's completely agree on that. And I guess within the confines of get money coming in, there's often a lot of different ways and a lot of things that need to be done and can be done to make that happen.
Yeah. So final question for you. What couple of tips would you give? There's aspiring business owners out there that'd love to have a brand like yours, maybe love to build a business. What tips could you pass on to them to say, think about this?
So I think if you're thinking about it, just start, because what you're thinking about now will change through action. And like what the idea for Manilife was at the start is very different to what it is now. Not that different, but it is different. And I think caveat of that is start, but don't quit your job if you have a job until you're at like absolute breaking point. Because the security that comes with like monthly income is pretty useful, particularly in the early days of starting business that's perhaps not making loads of money. And then, I mean, there's loads of stuff as you grow, but as you grow, one of the things which I often reflect on is beware the like growing to-do list or growing worry list, crowding out what you love doing and what you like, that what fueled you in the early days. Particularly if what you love doing is like getting out and about and meeting people and selling. I think quite often, particularly founders who end up being the bosses, like because their worry list is so long and their to-do list can become so long, they often can get strapped to their desks, not realizing that like where the most important place and valuable place they can be is out and about meeting people. And that definitely happened to us for a period. And then like good luck favors those that just like keep going. So favors those that keep going and puts themselves in positions where like serendipity can play out. So that a lot of that is getting out about meeting people.
Yeah. No, I love that. These are great little nuggets. Just start. You'd be surprised how many people I meet, Stu, who say, I've got an idea. I just need a bit of help to get going and to make it into some sort of idea. And I said, yes, just go. Let's have a meeting. Let's thrash it out and let's have a conversation. And they keep on telling me they're getting ready. And I said, you'll never be ready.
Yeah.
That's the problem. The problem
Like
is that you
pregnant.
keep getting ready. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't get in the swimming pool, you can keep planning this swimming adventure, but at some point you got to dive in, you know. But they
it's
kind of
funny
like
that.
they just keep planning,
Yeah,
researching.
no,
It's
for
just,
sure. And I think that's because it's funny, as the business grew, my like kind of lack of planning or like tendency to just do became slightly trickier. But like I think often people who start is like their bias to action is almost laughable. And my bias to action, even now, is pretty laughable. And yeah, I think that's probably got a lot to do with how we got to where we are now.
yeah, brilliant. And then you said start, but don't quit your job. That's another one I like to share as well. I say to people, look, you know, business is tough. You know, you don't believe all the hype you get from social media that, you know, tell your boss that they're a bunch of they're whatever, walk out and then find yourself in a few months down the road absolutely hemorrhaging cash and have no backstop. So definitely I like that one. As you grow, beware of your to-do list. That's a great one. We call it working in the business, not on the business. You start forgetting that what got you going was, as you said, you maybe went out and did sales, built relationships, and you were dynamic and exciting. And then you become a functionary who's just bogged down and nobody's building the business anymore. Nobody's got the vision or anything. So I like that one as well. And I like this one as well. Good luck favors those who keep going. Sometimes you have to just dig in and say, I'm not going to give up, you know. Hopefully you haven't mortgaged your house and told your boss that you know where to go at the same time. But as you said, once you know what we call it, one few foot from gold, you know, when people get really close to the gold and then they just stop and you think, wow, you were just on the verge of greatness and then you just gave up, you know. So absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much for your time. We've covered all sorts there from when you started all the way through and different lessons. So really appreciate you taking some time out to just have a conversation with us.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Sorry if I rambled on.
No, it was fine. Absolutely fine.